Hey, if you're watching this and your adult college grad is down in the basement, maybe sleeping in, you have a lot of company. According to census data, almost 40% of young adults ages 18 to 34 are bunking with mom and dad, and it's making a lot of news. The New York Times saying the boomerang kids won't leave. The Wall Street Journal proclaiming it's a 75-year high. How about the Fiscal Times fearing the kids aren't all right? But is living in a household with grandparents, parents, and kids really so terrible? Jonathan Coppage wrote on that subject for the Washington Post. He's a senior visiting fellow at the free market think tank R Street Institute and a contributing editor to the American Conservative. So you say we're repeating a pattern that used to be the case.
That's absolutely right. What's important to recognize is that people living with their families is not at all a new trend, but rather the way that things used to be. We've taken to understanding ourselves through the lens of a very weird place in American history, which was the 1950s. But when you look at the greater sweep of our country's history, people lived with their parents as a norm, and parents then lived with their kids. What was important is that they contributed. And it's not a matter of fact that living at home means that you're dependent. You can still absolutely be productive, but you can take advantage of the familial support.
What accounts for this?
So it's a really interesting trend. Some of this is delayed marriage, and part of this is that in the 60s we had the youngest marriage, age of first marriage in American history. And so we grew to expect that as the common pattern, and now we marry much later, and so we don't form independent households, and so we don't have a need for the younger people to acquire entire homes to themselves when they can be fiscally prudent by sharing the housing wealth of their parents.
Jonathan, I think there's a stigma, nevertheless, associated with it. Let me show you a quick snippet from former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, and then I'll make my point. Roll it.
If you're a senior, you know, Medicaid, almost half of Medicaid is about long-term health care. You want grandma living in the guest room?
I mean, it's a pejorative the way she expresses it, right? Grandma living in the guest room. Maybe grandma living in the guest room is a good thing. Grandma pitches in. She's with the grandkids. She loves those kids. She never gets to see them otherwise. I mean, I'm wondering what the stats would reveal if those negative headlines that I showed at the outset of the conversation weren't the case and more people were cool with the idea that, yeah, Junior is still living in the basement.
Yes, absolutely. And what is especially important for the grandma living in the guest room when Speaker Pelosi is talking about Medicaid and care, we've taken to solving the problem of family dissolution with a lot of spending, whether it's whether it's young people spending money on very expensive apartments, whether it's older people spending a lot of money on very expensive housing situations. When the patterns of youth and aging are not new phenomena in human history. We have traditionally solved them by relying on each other. And that comes at a cost that is free and allows us to provide mutual support.
One final subject, you referenced housing. The zoning laws of the country are not prepared for this trend. Explain.
Exactly. So in the 1950s, that very extraordinary time, we passed a lot of laws to try and build a lot of housing very quickly for the young people who were coming home from the war. The problem is that we built everything around this idea of one massive cohort of young people coming in, getting married, and settling down. And so what we did is lose the ability to build more flexible forms, such as an accessory dwelling unit, what was literally called the granny flat, the mother-in-law unit, and we have passed zoning codes that make those almost impossible. And it's not even just local codes. It's important to recognize that federal financing greatly shaped the formation of the American household and continues to today, whether it's main streets or whether it is accessory dwelling units and the ability to have the granny flat.
If Granny is going to live in the basement, that'll be fine, but if you want to build a tiny addition or maybe build out the garage, zoning might not allow it, is your point. Hey, it's a really insightful piece. Thank you for writing it.
Thank you for having me.
That's Jonathan Coppage. Still to come, your best and worst tweets, like this one.